Welcome everyone, it's Pander here with an exciting game between Fnatic and Virtus Pro as part of the Join Dota League. Fnatic in the bottom Radiant side, running the Wisp and Tiny, as it looks like Wisp has a bit of a graphical glitch at the moment, making him partly invisible. Crystal Maiden and Pugna could be taking up the bottom lane as Tiny's rotated into the middle lane already. And Venomancer holding in the top. Outworld Devourer in the mid lane for Virtus Pro. Up top is going to be a safe lane Storm Spirit along with an Omniknight, which is a rather interesting combination we'll get to in a few moments. And also the Enchantress taking up the jungle. And offlane Darkseer, a rare pick, but incredibly good in this kind of combination along with the Storm Spirit. Storm Spirit and Omniknight is one of those combinations we don't see very often, but it's incredibly powerful. Having a virtual BKB on the Storm Spirit at about 2 minutes in, as soon as Omniknight hits level 2, is insanely powerful. Especially considering they don't have to have multiple people up in the lane. Storm Spirit should be able to handle this lane pretty effectively, as Wisp is actually rotating up top. So it could be a set of dual lanes with a Tiny in the middle, which means a lot of early game pushing from Fnatic, and I really like the idea. Tiny not too affected by the Outworld Devourer. Sure, he basically burns all the mana, and Omniknight in a lot of trouble, as Venomancer has taken that Poison Sting and is going to basically take him down to half health right off the bat. He's shared most of his tangos, so he's going to be in a bit of trouble, but he should be just fine. And another interesting thing about this Virtus Pro lineup, Storm Spirit with the Ion Shell is going to be incredibly powerful as well. Just having him zip in there and do a ton of damage is really going to decide this game, because Virtus Pro needs to get off to a good start. They don't have the late game power of a Tiny Wisp, and it is just going to be the solo Venomancer. They decided to bring the Wisp down towards the middle lane and just make sure that this Tiny gets his protection, and Wisp can do a lot of pulling and stacking. Darkseer are going to be in a bit of trouble in this bottom lane. They don't have a ton of kill potential between Crystal Maiden and Pugna. They really need a few levels before that happens, but it should be enough to keep him fairly zoned out and at least have to watch his back and burn his consumables pretty quickly. Excellent ward here prevents the pull through. I don't think he cares too much about this initial pull, because as soon as that happens, Darkseer can just run over with his surge, steal the experience, and get a slight level advantage. Tiny and Wisp rotating up top, and we're going to have Venomancer rotate into the middle lane. I like this decision. I don't think Tiny was going to get a whole lot out of that middle lane. He's going to get some good CS, but Venomancer is going to be completely zoned out. And up top, I don't think Storm Spirit and Omniknight can do anything to this lane at all. While Venomancer should be able to get a bunch of free experience, considering he's a ranged hero. He doesn't have the attack damage of Outworld Devourer, especially with one or two of those stacks of the Imprisonment. But it should be fairly passive throughout the early stage of this game. I really don't see where a kill could come from outside of just catching someone in the Wisp Tiny combination. But Tiny's still only level 1 to the almost level 3 of Storm Spirit and a level 2 of Omniknight, so it's going to be incredibly difficult to actually catch anyone. Enchantress did try and rotate into the middle a little bit, but I don't think she's going to be able to get anything off in the first bit of the game. But interesting choice here is to pick up the Satyr Mind Stealer. You can just walk in and mana burn the Tiny or the Wisp and basically ensure that they don't get their spell combo off. Tiny basically requires his entire mana pool and actually doesn't even have enough total mana to get off his full combo at this point in time, considering he doesn't have any extra mana with him. So it's going to be incredibly hard for him to get that combo off, and that basically keeps him safe. Darkseer rotating down bottom. Going to be able to pick off a bunch of minions here and just make Pugna's life miserable. Pugna doesn't have one of the best last-hitting animations in the game. He's basically forced a Nether Blast pretty much on every opportunity he can get, or he's going to be in a lot of trouble, as it's going to take a lot of harassment. Darkseer also gets the opportunity to rotate in and basically take up all the camps in the jungle, because he's one of the best junglers, considering he doesn't take a minion like an Enchantress or Chen. Darkseer continues to just proxy down bottom, and Pugna's really paying for it. He's getting low on consumables, his mana is not particularly great, and Darkseer's up in levels considering Crystal Maiden stole a fair bit of experience, but cheeky move there by Hani, actually picking up a deny or two when he can, and it's going to be a good opportunity just to rotate back there when the minion wave is far away. And this is why it hurts so much. He just has to sit there and tank the wave. And Darkseer's a no real threat because they see all three members up top. Tiny's still not enough mana to actually cast his full combo unless he pops the stick. Storm Spirit might be in a bit of trouble, but with no real follow-up and an Omniknight that's already level 3, Storm Spirit's off to a great start. And considering the CS overall, I definitely have to give this early game to Virtus Pro, doing a great job of keeping the Tiny down. Only 16 CS so far. Venomancer and Pugna are decent, but Darkseer getting pretty much everything. Same with the Outworld Devourer, especially in terms of denies. But this could be a game-changing run if Enchantress decides to pick up that haste and rotate up top. She has one decent minion, but I don't think having two... Or yeah, it's not going to be alive long enough. If she had the Centaur, she might have been able to rotate up top, but I don't think she was going to go for it with just the Tormentor. It's good regeneration and a great way to actually prevent being killed in a lane. But its damage is not particularly great, and it doesn't have any crowd control. So it's easy for Tiny or Wisp just to heal up anything that happens in that lane. Pugna finally getting enough damage to actually force Darkseer onto the wave. Darkseer proxying also means that Pugna can't actually push out this tower. As we look at the bottom tower, it's still at full health 5 minutes into the game. And for a Pugna lane, that is incredibly rare. He's going to start his pushing now, but I'm not sure it's going to be enough at this point, as soon as Darkseer gets to use the curry to pick up his bottle. And that is something that's definitely going Virtus Pro's way, as you want to keep those towers up as long as possible against the Pugna lineup, as he could easily rip through that tower if he got an opportunity just to push it down. But so far he's been denied fairly well, despite him getting pretty good CS. Enchantress comes in, he's got the Hellbearer. It's a good slow off, but I'm not sure it's going to be enough. Storm Spirit does have 1 point in the pull, and it might be first blood, as he does do a good bit of damage. And that protection from the Omniknight just way too strong. Magic immunity incredibly powerful early on, and Darkseer has had to go back to base. It's going to refill up and go back down bottom and start protecting this tower by way of proxy. Outworld Devourer doing great job in the middle lane, almost perfect, as he's picked up 40 minions and 20 denies already at the 6-minute mark, and keeping Venomancer down. The Venomancer as a core is an interesting pickup, but it's a great choice in this type of lineup, as Fnatic needs to just hold out until late game, as Wisp Tiny will take down pretty much anything in the game. I don't think there's a harder carry than that. And Venomancer doesn't exactly need that much in terms of mana. He needs 20 for the wards at all levels, and he has the Poison Sting. He could put a point in Gale, but that's not particularly needed, as I don't think they're going to be rotating him around anytime soon. He's incredibly poor at rotating without help of supports, and they're all going to be needed up top for Tiny. As we saw in the last little engagement, Tiny takes a lot of damage. If it wasn't for Crystal Maiden and Wisp both helping him out, he probably would have gone down for first blood. Io has hit level 4, so he's getting pretty close to that level 6. They do get a nice hit on Enchantress, and that's first blood. Easily done. Dark Troll Summer just not getting the net there in time. And that's what Tiny does when he gets off to enough mana to actually use his combo. He's one of the strongest burst champions in the game for those first few minutes. And it just showed right there, it didn't take a whole lot from Wisp, as Tiny basically killed her on his own. And that definitely brings him back into this game, as he was getting hurt pretty hard overall. He's still at 35 minions, but compared to the Darkseer and the Outworld Devourer, it's just not enough at this point. And even Storm Spirit's getting pretty decent farm. And I'm not sure Tiny would have been able to do a whole lot if he didn't pick up that kill, or pick up some kills starting pretty soon. Darkseer continues the proxy and keeps his bottom tower alive, as Enchantress is going to rotate in the mid lane just to throw out a ward. Doesn't have a really good ganking creep, but it would still be pretty decent with the Outworld Devourer. But I don't think he can push into that Plague Ward kind of spree, and there's a good bit of damage, but there is no enchant. Still a few seconds off. If they'd waited for that, they could have gotten a kill. But Venomancer doing a ton of damage on the rebound. He had about 6 wards up at the time, and there was no way you can push out into that. He hasn't even put a point in the Venomous Gale, which is smart in this matchup. You're not going to be able to get it off. You're going to be constantly sitting at sub about 100 mana. And with 3 points in the Poison Sting, you can't really walk up there, especially as Enchantress, who has a fairly low movement speed. Storm Spirit's going to rotate down bottom, do some good damage, but there's the Nether Ward, and it's going to be Darkseer going down. Oh, just enough. With Spirit's coming forward and seal the deal, as Darkseer goes down in a very greedy attempt to take this bottom tower, but it will likely be denied. The Nether Ward, incredibly good against this lineup. It rips OD apart. Storm Spirit can't really do a whole lot when that's around, and Darkseer and Enchantress both burn a lot of mana in team fights, throwing out the impetus and the rest of their combo. Omniknight in a lot of trouble, but he does pop the protection. He pops the ultimate as well, keeping himself alive for now. Wisp has pit level 6 and used the ultimate to come in, so he'll be going down bottom in a few moments. Tiny does have the mana if he gets a combo off, but he takes Tiny with him, Wisp saving the Omniknight. And that's just unfortunate. One spell away, and he had it with him, but he's going to go in the Darkseer. Darkseer can try and get away, but I don't think he has the chance, as Tiny's dominating this game so far. And that's exactly what you want to see out of your Tiny. You farm decently well early. Not what you really want out of a Tiny, but pretty good for a kind of aggressive tri-lane. And this is exactly what Tinys need to do. Pick up the early kills. He is the highest net worth in the game at 4,000, right ahead of the OD. And this is very difficult for Virtus Pro at this point, as Tiny takes the first tower of the game. Storm Spirit going to jump in, get a good pull off, and an easy kill. Great combination, but there's protection from Omniknight. He will go down, but keeps Storm Spirit alive. The magic immunity proving incredibly powerful. And that's going to do wonders against that Nether Ward. I don't believe you take damage while you're in the BKB-esque form of the Omniknight. The Repel is just way too good at preventing that magic damage, and it should be very useful as this mid-game progresses, especially if they can combo it up with Storm Spirit and get it off before he zips in and takes a bunch of extra magical damage. Trixie in the mid lane doing a very good job of pressuring this tower. It's already down to about 500 health, and it's going to go down in a wave or two, as this is a cannon minion wave. And Outworld Devourer doesn't have the ability to push out this lane. He's going for the early 4-staff, which means we'll likely see a mech on the Darkseer, and it looks like he has picked up the chainmail. So that should be where he's going at this point in time. It looks like Tiny with the Wisp jump in and pick up an easy kill in the jungle. As Enchantress goes down, they did have a nice vision ward out here. It's going to spot anyone rotating around or anyone in the top side jungle. As we have a bit of engagement in the mid lane, Storm Spirit does pick off the Crystal Maiden. Outworld Devourer not able to really jump in and finish off Venomancer as he has a haste rune. Enchantress going to be drained out, but Omniknight going to be drained out. And Omniknight does go down. Mid tower falls as well. Storm Spirit going to be forced back to base, and I don't think the Outworld Devourer is getting out of this safely. Decrepify is up, but he does do a nice job of imprisoning himself, but no way to survive as Tiny is here. An easy kill. Roshan wanting to get on the action, but just couldn't actually get out of his pit long enough to take away the kill on the side of Fnatic. Fnatic doing an excellent job so far of just pushing these towers down, and they've really started the snowball. Virtus Pro had to snowball this game if they were going to win it. They picked a lineup that peaks in the early to mid game, as Outworld Devourer and Storm Spirit are just one of the best mid game combinations in the game. The problem comes in is when you don't have a true carry, and Pugna starts taking these towers down. Storm Spirit can jump in, but takes a lot of damage. Omniknight heal keeps him alive. Repel is there to make sure that he can just jump in and do a good bit of damage, but not going to be enough to secure any kills, as the Nether Ward does get decrepified and saved. That's about 100 gold that doesn't go Storm Spirit's way, and he'd really like to have it, as he's pretty poor at this point, sitting at 3,000 gold, below the Wisp, mostly due to the fact these towers have been going down fast since Fnatic picked off the Darkseer down in that bottom lane. And I don't expect this to end anytime soon, as the tower pressure from Fnatic is pretty insane. Tiny has gone with the Midas so far, as Midas basically ensures that he's going to get to late game incredibly fast, likely going to pick up a set of drums as well. And that's going to basically ensure the game for Fnatic. He can just sit around and farm for the next 10 to 15 minutes and pick off kills whenever Wisp has his ultimate up, which it should be up right now, and it is. He's level 8 already, and I fully expect to see a gank in this top lane pretty soon. They do not have a good set of vision at the moment. The Observer Ward's going to time out, doesn't see the Outworld Devourer, But top lane is going to be an easy tower for Fnatic. I expect Virtus Pro to try and defend it, but I don't think it's going to be particularly successful unless they get a real good game-changing ultimate from the Outworld Devourer. Venomancer getting at that wall of wards so that they really don't get initiated on. They do have a Plague Ward in the jungle, but a smoke pop by Virtus Pro. All 5 members up top, but at any point Fnatic could bring the rest of their team up. Crystal Maiden going to be spotted out, and an easy kill on her, but that is a lot of damage. Ultimate pop by the Omniknight, but it's going to be very good, as Wisp's already taken out. Omniknight does fall, but he did his job of keeping his team alive. Darkseer in a lot of trouble. Outworld Devourer does get imprisonment off, but it looks to be a defensive imprisonment, keeping himself alive and preventing a lot of damage from the Venomancer. Because as long as you're in that Astral Imprisonment, you don't take DOT damage. So the Venomancer ult and Poison Sting won't tick while he's sitting in that imprisonment. But all in all, that's going to be a win for Fnatic, as they're going to be able to take this tower pretty easily. They lost one extra person in the exchange, but overall that doesn't concern them too much as they take the tower. Venomancer's level 11. He's got the 2nd level of ultimate now. Pugna's level 11. So huge amounts of damage coming out from him. And this is basically do or die time for Virtus Pro. As if unless they can pick off 2 or 3 kills up here, they're really going to be in danger of losing this game. As it's 15 minutes in the game, and this will be almost all the outer towers. They are grouped up, but are spotted out by the Crystal Maiden. They can't really go on the Crystal Maiden, as there are too many other high priority targets. Repel is used on the Outworld Devourer, but it's not going to be too effective, as Storm Spirit has to just run. Darkseer in a lot of trouble and should go down to the Spirits and bottles up. But the engagement's happening back there as Outworld Devourer does pick off the IO. But it is not enough as Omniknight gets wrecked. Outworld Devourer doing a ton of damage with that Repel, but he just can't stand and fight. Not strong enough as Tiny hits too hard and will be able to pick off the Storm Spirit as the domination by this Tiny continues. Enchantress no way to escape as they're using spells and not auto attacks. And that is a huge win for Fnatic as they continue to dominate this game. They started off pretty poorly, considering their kind of tri lane didn't work out. They had to make a swap as Tiny didn't work out too well in the middle lane, but it worked out overall pretty well. As Venomancer could push in the Outworld Devourer without wasting a whole lot of time and mana. He just threw down a Plague Ward and a Poison Sting, and Outworld Devourer can't really get in there and do anything. And Tiny up top found 1 or 2 kills. Courier sitting around likely waiting just to be sent back home and possibly doing some scouting, as he does give them flying vision. But excellent set of wards out here for Virtus Pro, and this is how they're going to have to come back, is find a pick off with these Observer wards in the middle of nowhere. Fnatic also has a good set of wards right there in the middle lane. Same thing down here near the Roshan pit. But I don't think we're going to be seeing a whole lot come of those wards, as Fnatic's likely going to sit back and wait for the next Wisp Tiny ultimate, and then push this bottom lane out. So all those wards for Virtus Pro are going to go for naught, even though they're good wards. There's just no objectives in this top half of the map. Tier 2 already down, top Tier 1 already down, and this is basically just a go signal for Fnatic to hit this bottom tower. And if Virtus Pro don't know they're going right here, it's a little crazy. And I'm really surprised they haven't rotated down already. They have 4 people up here in the top side jungle, just trying to push out this lane. But this Tier 2 is going to go down incredibly quickly. And at this point, I just don't think you can defend it on the side of Virtus Pro. You're going to have to take a fight in the base. And that's still not an easy ask, as soon as this tower goes down, Tiny will have the Aghanim Scepter, along with the drums and Midas, making him incredibly powerful. Pugna has the mech already picked up. Venomancer with the Hand of Midas working his way to its Aghanims. Crystal Maiden with not a whole lot, but she doesn't need much. And the Urn picked up on the Io, who's played exceptionally well this game, saving Tiny early, getting a lot of good ganks off. And I think it's going to be a trade here by Virtus Pro, but I'm not sure it's actually a trade, as Venomancer's up top and going to stop the push with a Plague Ward or 2. Engagement might happen down bottom, but it's really dangerous if Outworld Devourer comes in. He does staff himself up, but there's the Decrepify and no more auto attacks. Outworld Devourer will be able to take down the Nether Ward, but that's not enough. You're really going to have to find a pick off, and I don't think they're going to. Storm Spirit's going to come in, but immediately stunned and picked off. Darkseer in a lot of trouble as well. The Imprisonment's nice on Tiny, but I don't think it's going to be enough. Outworld Devourer's going to have to use that ultimate soon. Ultimate pop by the Omniknight, and it is pretty good, but Pugna just continuing to live, and he lives for a good while. Tiny in a lot of trouble, and this could be the comeback Virtus.pro needs, as he is going to be taken fairly low, but Wisp just tethers him out and going to sacrifice himself. Excellent choice overall. Just get the Tiny out of there. He can go up back to farming. And you have the Venomancer down bottom who can tether away. Same with the Crystal Maiden, so he might not go down, but Tiny's going to come back at full health. Does get a stun off, but it doesn't hit anyone, as the Repel is out. Venomancer ult flies, but it does not hit too many people. Outworld Devourer gets a good ultimate off, only Venomancer falling, but Enchantress gets crushed by Tiny. Tiny does have the chance to pick up his Aghanim Scepter, and it's going to have to go run away pretty quickly. Don't think they can catch up to him at this point, as he's just a little too fast. Crystal Maiden in a lot of trouble, and Io falls. Looks like we're going to have Storm Spirit running in. We'll be able to get a bit of a slow on Tiny, and Tiny should fall. Don't see any way to keep him alive. Nice stun by Tiny, but not enough. And an easy kill by Storm Spirit. That's exactly what Virtus.pro needs. And we finally have a good break in the action, so this will give us a chance to look at the gold earned. Huge gold lead for Fnatic. Really starting around the time Wisp hit 6, and they picked up those first kill or two. Experience about even, thanks to the fact Virtus.pro picked up several big kills in that last fight and have been getting more experience around the map just overall throughout the game. The kills haven't meant as much, as they picked up a lot more in terms of minions, and we can check that as we look at the last hit deny chart. This Outworld Devourer over 100 already. Darkseer is soon to be at 100, and that's been the real big difference. They got a lot more out of the jungle from the Enchantress. They picked up a bit more in terms of lane minions and jungle from the Darkseer. And that's why the experience is so close in this game, but I'm not sure it's going to be enough unless Outworld Devourer gets that Scythe of Ice pretty soon. But he's still a good ways off of it. He's still about 2,100 gold away, depending upon what path he goes in picking that up. Enchantress, very poor at this point in time, working towards the Aghanims. I'm not sure that's the correct call this game, as a pipe would have been much needed. As I don't think damage has been the issue in these fights for Virtus.pro. It's been the ability to stay alive, as it seems like one person gets bursted down early in the fight, and it basically takes all the steam out of Virtus.pro's lineup, and they have to play defensively. If they had a pipe at this point, or at least the beginnings of a pipe, she might live through the Tiny Wisp combo and not get burst down instantly. And I don't think the heal is particularly effective on her as well. She basically dies instantly this fight. Though the big savior of these fights has been Omniknight with that Repel and the Guardian Angel, as it kept the Outworld Devourer in that fight. It prevented the Venomancer ult from landing on him, which would have been a death sentence in that last engagement. And it's been the real story of the game, as basically as the Omniknight goes, so does Virtus.pro, as the rest of their team really relies on him to keep them up, as he has great sustain but not a lot of damage. And the Outworld Devourer is hitting that peak point where he's going to be at maximum damage very soon. Looks like he's not going to go for Roshan. Not when he sees the entire Fnatic team kind of towards the middle of the lane. They don't have a ward out in this direction, but when you see a Venomancer pushed up this far, you have to expect him to have backup of some sort. Even a Crystal Maiden and the ability for Wisp Tiny to teleport in is enough to ward off Virtus.pro trying a Roshan or trying really anything at this point. They're very scared to go in their own jungle. And this is when you play the starvation game. You don't try to end the game anytime soon. You just let your Tiny sit around and farm. He's picked up 1,500 gold already, as in addition to having the Midas off cooldown. So we can use that to get some free gold. Gem is picked up, and it will be used to clear out all these wards. I could have sworn there was a gem picked up somewhere, but I could be wrong. And Pugna, yeah, Pugna has the gem. There we go. I knew I saw someone pick up a gem just a moment ago. I had to find it. Io picking up the Vladimirs is a great item for this game, as they're really relying on Tiny's auto attacks for damage, along with just throwing out that burst. And Pugna doesn't really need to support at this point. Wisp looking to go in, but I don't think he wants to. He doesn't know exactly where they're going to be teleporting in. So it looks like we do have a pause. That'll give us time to just go quickly through and check on the items of Virtus.pro. Storm Spirit about to pick up the Orchid. Not a terrible time for the Orchid, but not good considering he had safe lane farm throughout most of the game. The big problem with him is he's died twice and just hasn't found the farm throughout the map. Well, Tiny's picked up virtually all of the kills on the side of Fnatic, and that's really been a saving grace, considering Fnatic had a pretty poor start. That turned out great once the Tiny Wisp combination got on target. And that is one of Fnatic's signature combos, is the Tiny Wisp. They basically like to run it whenever they see a good opportunity to apply map pressure, and they don't have a very early game focused team, as Virtus.pro has basically an entire mid game strategy going this game. They have the ability to find pickoffs with a Storm Spirit. They have early magic immunity without BKBs coming in from the Omniknight. And Shiva's guard picked up on the Outworld Devourer, just looking for the ability to kite more in these engagements, as Virtus.pro has the ability to kite incredibly well now that that's up. Between the Degen aura and the magic immunity and healing from Omniknight, kiting should be what Virtus.pro wants to do in all these engagements. They have smoked and are heading towards this bottom lane. I don't think they're going to find anyone out, as there is nothing really in the area. They have Venomancer wards covering the map. So if a smoke does get broken, and it's not broken early, they're basically going to be spotted out. Smoke is going to basically fade, as the jungle will be taken by the Outworld Devourer. But a smoke burn for nothing on the side of Virtus.pro, as they continue to just scour this jungle, trying to find a pickoff. But I don't see any reason for Fnatic to go anywhere that's not at least 3. As Tiny Wisp can go to the other side of the map and teleport in, but they pop a smoke of their own. They know exactly where Virtus.pro is. And this should be a fairly easy engagement if Fnatic gets the jump in. But they don't have great initiation at this point, and that's their big weakness. Venomancer picking up the Diffusal Blade, looking for initiation and to purge off that repel, and that's the big weakness of Omniknight, is it does get purged off pretty easily. And the question is, who will they find? Their smoke is still not popped. Smoke does wear off, and they're going to engage. Venomancer just throw the ward to start it, but the repel instantly purged. Guardian Angel, not enough to save him, as it just prevents physical damage, and it's a huge win so far. Omniknight does get a good heal off, but it's not enough. Io likely to fall, as Darkseer is forced to retreat. Tiny in the area, doing some good damage, and it's going to throw the Darkseer, picking up the kill on Enchantress. And that's a 4-for-1. And with that Diffusal Blade, this basically spells the end of Virtus.pro's mid-game, as you can't run in there with the repel as it gets purged off. It purges off Guardian Angel if they're both on at the same time. And it's just looking grim for Virtus.pro so far. Fnatic playing this mid-game insanely well. And this Tiny feels like a late-game Tiny already. He's almost up to 4,000 gold. And what I would expect to be Assault Kuros next, as he is just insanely farmed. Enchantress does disconnect, and we'll have to wait for her for just a few moments. We'll take a quick look at the graph, and it's back to about 10,000 gold lead for Fnatic. They were over 10,000 before losing that big engagement in the bottom lane. Experience back in their favor, where it did slide slightly to Virtus.pro, but it is just not enough at this point. Wisp Tiny too strong as we progress into the later stages of the mid-game, as the mid-game came very early thanks to several kills on Tiny. And Pugna's just done an excellent job of pushing down towers. I really love the pickup by Venomancer when they rotate him into the middle lane. He's a good offlaner, and we've seen several teams run him in the offlane. You just throw out wards, throw out a few poison sting auto attacks, and basically just survive, pick up a bunch of experience. You're going to die a few times. It feels very similar to the Nyx Assassin offlane, where you're just kind of there to get some experience and pick up a few extra levels. But this time they rotate him into the mid lane after seeing Tiny wasn't going to get the farm he needed, and they really just shut down the Outworld Devourer. He got the farm, but he could never rotate around the map, as you really love to see Outworld Devourers rotate around the map, just play very aggressively in lane, and they couldn't really do that. You can't go in on the Venomancer. You Astral Imprison him up, you have to deal with 3 or 4 wards attacking you. The imprisonment doesn't really stop the Plague War from being cast. It's just 20 mana. And 20 mana is basically nothing. You basically have that as the base on Venomancer. So that bait lane basically went in Fnatic's favor, even though Outworld Devourer played incredibly well, getting a bunch of farm. It just has not traded into teamfight wins. And the lack of real crowd control on the Virtus.pro side has hurt them in these last few engagements as well. They have a bit of a slow from the Omniknight, the imprisonment from the Outworld Devourer, the pull in from the Storm Spirit. and the slow from Enchantress is their only real crowd control effects, but none of those are particularly effective in this matchup, as the slows from Crystal Maiden and Venomancer have just been way too strong. And even the ultimate from Darkseer just has not been particularly effective. It went down in the last fight, but I didn't notice it. When you see the ultimate from Darkseer, the replica wall, you really want to see a big effect. You want to see about 4 or 5 clones running and swinging and really just crushing the enemy team. But in that last fight, considering there's only one real auto attack champion, it doesn't do a whole lot. And this is just kind of the few of the downfalls that Virtus.pro has run into this game, is they have not had the upper hand since fairly early in the game. They started off well, but just have not been able to translate that into a mid-game style. And as this game goes later and later, Tiny is getting big. Let's see if he has anything on the courier. He does not just yet. But between the IO and Tiny, there's just no stopping Fnatic at this point. They should be able to pick up the Aegis pretty easily. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if Tiny just sells his teleport scrolls, picks up an Assault Cross, because he's at about the gold for it. And this becomes a death ball push for Fnatic. These middle lane towers don't stand a chance against Tiny and Pugna just pushing in on them. And as we've seen from the last few fights, as Enchantress does reconnect, Venomancer with the Diffusal Blade basically counters the Omniknight. And that's one of the reasons why Omniknight's not picked up in competitive play super often, as characters with Purges and the Diffusal Blade basically shut down the Repel. I would like to see Omniknight picked up in lineups a bit more, as he's a very strong champion in that early to mid game stage, and unless you have a Diffusal Blade champion or a champion that can kind of branch off and pick up that Diffusal Blade, he's incredibly potent and has done real wonders this game on the side of Virtus.pro. The Purification doing a lot to save his team and a lot of damage, and there's Enchantress reconnecting again. It's just not been enough, as there has not been a real hard carry on the side of Virtus.pro, and Outworld Devourer is basically just shut down every single time he tries to go in and fight, because he can't stand there and fight. In the last engagement, instantly purged off the Repel, and he was basically left for dead. Bit of kind of waiting around, as Virtus.pro has a few errors in their client. Not sure exactly what's going on, but it looks like they should be good to go in just a few moments. Storm Spirit has to basically get in here and steal the Aegis if Virtus.pro wants to continue this game, as he does have the Orchid up, but I'm not sure he has enough. Plague Wards are going to spot him out if he gets another one further down the path, and I think that's what he's going to do. Yeah, they spot him out pretty easily. Repel is up on the Storm Spirit, so he's not going to be just stunned out, but I don't think he can really jump in there at this point. The Plague Wards are just too annoying, and he's already at about half health just from the Plague Wards beating in on him. Roshan very low. Storm Spirit does not have vision. Nice use of the stun there by Tiny, just to basically ensure that if Storm Spirit jumped in and he didn't have Repel on him, he was going to get stunned up and have no chance to snatch the Aegis. 4,500 gold up on the Tiny, and should be off that Assault Cross, unless he wants to just go Mana style, which would also be a viable choice, and give him a bit more movement speed in these team fights. Either option is good at this point. I like the Assault Cross personally for the ability to push down towers, and at this point Fnatic just want to push down towers. I don't see anything really stopping them. Pugna has picked up the Aghanim Scepter, so he's going to be even more tanky in these fights, as there's not a lot of lockdown for him. The Vacuum from Darkseer and the Pull from Storm Spirit are about the only things that are really going to stop him in a fight. Imprisonment also going to stop him, but that also prevents damage going into him. And with the Aghanim Scepter, you can just instantly start that back up. Orchid will also likely be used on Pugna in these fights, and it is Manta Stop picked up by Tiny, as Storm Spirit basically has to focus Pugna with the Orchid, or else he's just going to do too much damage with the Drain and the Nether Blast. And if he gets off a very good ward, like in these previous engagements, that ward just does a ton of damage, as every single auto attack from the Outworld Devourer rips his health apart, and he doesn't have the ability to stay alive long. That's likely one of the reasons why Omniknight was picked, is to throw the Repel on someone and not get crushed by the Nether Ward. It's a good kind of counterplay, but it's just not enough at this point in the game. So Maiden going to run forward and just prevent these towers from being taken. Only one tower taken by Virtus Pro so far, and that is the bottom lane tower as we approach the 28-minute mark. Tiny way out in front of everyone as he's sitting at 1,500 total net worth. Or 15,000 total net worth, excuse me. As he just basically dominated this game so far. 9-2-3. Been in the front line for most of these engagements. And his burst potential has just been amazing. Question becomes now, how does Fnatic attack this Virtus Pro base? Virtus Pro can defend fairly well at their base. If the tower's hitting on someone and they get a good ultimate off from both the Outworld Devourer and the Omniknight, they can turn this engagement around and take a few fights. And they're going to have to take several at this point if they want to survive. But they're going to be forcing a fortification on the side of Fnatic. They have to burn that fortification incredibly quickly. Because look at Tiny chunking down, 100 health every single swing. And it's not getting prettier than that, as that tower's down to half health before Virtus Pro even respond. As Tiny goes whacking against that tower, ward is thrown down as the tower just falls without really an engagement. The question is, will they actually engage? Shiva's Guard doing a good job so far. The Wisp Illusion gets pulled in, and that's 15 seconds without one of the kind of stuns on Storm Spirit. Imprisonment is used, as Tiny does lose a good bit of mana, but that doesn't matter at this point. That mattered early on, but Tiny has enough mana to do whatever he wants at this point. And Fnatic are doing the smart thing and slow playing it. Virtus Pro could take a 5v5 fight if Fnatic misplay it, but when you just send the Tiny up there, the worst that happens is Tiny gets sent back to base by the Wisp and basically comes back at full strength. Darkseer picks up the BKB so that he can actually survive and do something in these team fights. The last few team fights, he's basically been shut down thanks to the mana burn from the Nether Ward. And this is just an advantage of having this kind of lineup from Fnatic. You can't really engage into him. Tiny is imprisoned up, but there's not going to be any follow-up. Heals bent by the Omniknight, so this might be a decent time to engage. Outward Devourer just off the mark. Storm Spirit going to jump in with the Repel, doing some decent damage, but that's not going to be enough. BKB's thrown. Beautiful vacuum wall by the Darkseer, but it is not good enough. The illusions tank all the damage. And with that ultimate down, this is Virtus Pro's time to retreat and probably give up this set of racks and wait for that again. They really need the Darkseer to have his wall combo up, as Fnatic's going to be pushing in this base without any real threats. The Pugna ward's down for a few seconds, but it should be up pretty soon as it falls. And Fnatic's going to wait around for that Nether ward. As soon as it goes down, I expect them to push in there. Darkseer with still a minute left on his ultimate, and basically nothing else was burned. Venomancer burned his ultimate, but with Aghanim Scepter, that's up pretty quickly. It's only about 60-second cooldown with that up, so we should have it in for the next big push, and I think that's what they're waiting on at this point. One more creep wave. Storm Spirit working on that BKB, but it's not going to come in time for this next engagement, as I don't see Fnatic waiting at this point. They know that several of the key ultimates from Virtus Pro are down. Tiny going to be imprisoned up, and just does a bit of harassment damage. And he's going to run forward, pop the illusions, and kill the racks. Ranged racks is down, and he just chunks away at the melee racks. Just can't do anything about it, as they don't have a good answer for him, and this should be a free racks. And there we go. They do get a good stun on the Outworld Devourer, so he can't really engage. And I think that's the right play by Virtus Pro. You have to just give up that top racks, as much as you don't want to. You have to wait for the Darkseer wall to come back up. It's a huge set of illusions, and they really need that in this next engagement. If they don't get a very good wall off, they're basically going to die and lose the game on the side of Virtus Pro. Even if they do get a good vacuum wall off, I'm not sure it's enough at this point. They had a good idea going into this game on the side of Virtus Pro, but they just did not get off to a good enough start. It was a good start, but just not good enough, and Tiny found too many kills throughout the early portion of the game. And this should be a very good opportunity for Virtus Pro if they can find a pickoff or two. But smart play by Fnatic. They're sitting around S5, and they do decide to smoke up everyone in that smoke. And I don't expect them to find anyone, as I feel Virtus Pro has very good positioning up on this hill. Though they just... Nope, they're not going to. They decided to go towards the middle lane, and I don't blame them. Just smoke up to the middle lane, crush a creep wave and anyone near it. The question is, who will they find? And they do get a very nice stun, and that's going to be the Omniknight down. And without Omniknight, don't think they can do it. Good vacuum wall, keeps him in this game for a while, as we do see the Decrepify coming out on the Venomancer. But that's not going to be enough. Darkseer falls. Enchantress is going to fall as well. And that's a good game for Virtus Pro. They took a decent fight, but they were just too far behind. If Omniknight had lived to pop that Guardian Angel, that might have been a different story. But he just got crushed in that engagement. And a beautiful game overall by Fnatic. Virtus Pro not having a chance outside the early portion of the game. And it was a good attempt by Virtus Pro. They had a kind of a different draft and a different lineup. And it had potential. It just not against this lineup from Fnatic. Not against the Wisp Tinies. They've just found too much in the middle portion of the early game. Welcome everyone to the Keys of the Game, where we watch some of the highlights and big turning points in the game we just watched. Alright, this is the first key to the game between Fnatic versus Virtus Pro. Virtus Pro had an amazing lane setup. They had the Storm Spear and Omniknight top, which shuts down the Venomancer. He's basically going to be getting a little bit of experience. Also in the mid lane, shut down Tiny. He couldn't walk forward. He couldn't really get any CS. But Fnatic recognized these terrible lanes and immediately rotated them around. They lost a bit of experience in farm, but Venomancer will go on to do very well against the Outworld Devourer and basically shut down his ability to roam around the map. He still gets great farm, but when you can't roam on an Outworld Devourer, it really hurts. And top lane, Wisp Tiny basically get a free lane up here. They take a good bit of harassment from the Storm Spirit, but nothing that they can't just shrug off with one or two tangos and the overcharge. Second key of the game here is the first blood by Tiny. They have a bit of vision in the jungle, but they don't really see the Enchantress. He has to basically go fishing for kills at this point. And he groups up with the IO and just decides, we're going to go hunt this Enchantress in the jungle. They do see her just slightly with that ward, but they're able to easily take this first blood and turns what was an average farming Tiny into a very strong Tiny. So he gets off to this snowball and picks up several kills shortly thereafter. Alright, this key of the game is going to be when Storm Spirit and the Darkseer fail pretty miserably in a gank in the bottom lane. The tower's fairly low, and Storm Spirit just walked out and started beating on the tower. They could have taken this tower for free. But instead, they try to go on the Pugna, but Pugna just completely turns it around thanks to the Nether Ward and a good blast. I will eventually pick up this kill, giving him fairly quick level 6, and the tower will get denied, really hurting VP's chances in a lineup that needs to win in the mid-game. This is a big fight happening right about the 15-minute mark, which is the next key to the game. As Virtus Pro coming with a decent opener, getting a nice Satyr Tormentor blast, and making sure Tiny doesn't get in the fight. But they really get turned around when Storm Spirit just gets blown up at the beginning of the fight. He loses pretty much all his health and can't cast any spells. Darkseer gets pushed off to the side of the fight and will eventually go down. Outworld Devourer does some good damage, and it keeps Darkseer alive, but they just continue to fight instead of cutting their losses. They've lost the Omniknight, who never had his ultimate. Darkseer never had his ultimate and died in the fight. Storm Spirit gets taken out as well, and Enchantress not able to really commit anything to that fight. She didn't have more than one creep. She had no crowd control with her minion, and Virtus Pro just gets swept up in that fight, overextending without the ultimates. If they had the ultimates on the Omniknight or the Darkseer, they could have turned that around, but just didn't have any opportunity in that engagement. The next key to the game happens at about the 24-30 mark, as Virtus Pro have just taken a slight win, as they've found several pickoffs throughout the map, and they've just failed a smoke gank. Fnatic decides to smoke up themselves, seeing the entire Virtus Pro team down bottom. The big item here is the Venomancer picking up the Diffusal Blade. Instantly, they burst down the Outworld Devourer. He had no real chance to fight there. The wall gets used by the Darkseer, but nothing really gets done. Omniknight is forced to retreat. They pick off the IO, but get nothing else for it. Darkseer gets taken away. They burn the Enchantress down. and they basically dominate that fight, and Virtus Pro has no way to come back after this. They burned several of their key ultimates. They lost the Repel, which has been keeping them alive in these last few fights, and this allows Fnatic to pick up the Aegis and basically steamroll the rest of the game. Thank you for watching this Gamecast by Pander. If you wish to see more, please check out my YouTube and Twitch links below. Thank you again for watching.